Welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest, and we're here in the small truck today to do a cool video for everybody. This is going to be a video about my brake change routine as a mobile mechanic. So what I do when I go and do a brake change, this one's going to be an interesting job because we're going to do everything. We're going to bleed the brakes. We're going to actually replace the calipers because he does need new calipers. It was quoted by another shop, new rotors and new brake pads. And so we'll go through what I do when I get out here to do brakes on a vehicle and you know what that entails. We're in the small truck today. We've been in it all day because the alternator died on me last night. You'll see that in a different video. So I went and picked that up this morning, switched out the alternator. I've been using this all day, so we're not in the big rescue truck. But that has a wrap on it now. You'll probably see that in one of the next videos. So that's exciting. And here we are doing those brakes. All right, first things first, we'll get some gloves. I'll usually take a few pair of extra gloves and tuck them in my pocket here because I'll usually break one or two. So we've got our jack stand sitting over there. Always use a jack stand and our jack, so we'll go ahead and get it lifted up. Typically aftermarket wheels are always going to have locking lugs from my experience. So I've got my locking lug nut kit there. Got this drain pan because we're going to be replacing those calipers, so something to catch all that brake fluid. I've got new brake fluid here so we can top it off and bleed it here with a little bleed bottle. It's my favorite thing to use just because it really keeps you from making a mess. We've got new calipers, new rotors, new brake pads, and then some tools. So we'll get set up and check back in. All right, we've got this jacked up safely. The weight's on the jack stand and this jack's here for support. I had a viewer send in this awesome kneeling mat because everybody's so concerned about my knees, so thank you very much for sending in this kneeling mat. Also another viewer sent in some gloves, the nice you know, kind that aren't made out of plastic, but since I'm going to be doing stuff with brake fluid, I don't want to ruin them on the very first job, so I'll use those later. But thank you for sending those in, everybody. I'll try these out, but so far so good. I knelt on it here to place the jack and everything, so it was pretty awesome. We'll get this taken off and get a look at what's going on down there. But here's the tool set up, just a few bags, my drip pan, and then I'll put on one side rotors, the correct caliper, because you got to put them on the right side for the bleeder valve, and the brake pads. So these are the only things that need to go over to the other side when we're done over here. And I chose the shady side first so I don't overheat too bad at first. But here we are, a pretty quiet road on the side of the road, Roadside Rescue. All right, so here we are. There's a few other things that need to be addressed that I'll bring up with the customer just right off the bat. You want to look around. A little bit of rust. I would call this a lot for here, but people from the Rust Belt tend to think that's humorous because there's not actually too much rust. The sway bar end links the boots are busted, and this upper ball joint as well. The lower ball joint on this side looks fine. I'll get you a better look at that in a minute. But these rotors not held in by any screws. Those are my favorite. That's nice. We'll just give them a good tap with our sledgehammer when we get to that point. And we'll take the brake line off. Probably very last. We'll remove this bracket so it has lots of wiggle room. And then we'll just want to do that quickly so we don't actually drain out a lot of the fluid from the reservoir itself. And you don't want to get air all the way through the lines, through the ABS module. That can cause issues. So it's best to just do this quickly, and then when you flush the fluid, drain it from up there, refill it, and then let that new fluid run through. But we'll look at that before we decide if we're going to flush the whole system or if we're just going to get new fluid topped off. We'll see how that fluid looks. So without further ado, we will dig in. Okay, a couple of minutes later, fighting with these little pins. The springs were only on one side. If I remember correctly, they're supposed to be on both, which means they were just lost in the past. Typically, you would press these pistons all the way in before you started. You know, you could use these pads to help you before you took the next ones out. You can put a little pry bar in there and pry those back on one side than the other. But since we're replacing the pistons and they are already fully compressed, then it's not that big of a deal. So we will loosen up these bolts on the back side holding this caliper on, and then we'll remove this rotor here. The only thing holding this on was a zip tie, so the bolt has broken off. I'm not sure I'm going to do anything to replace that today, so it may just get zip tied back and get addressed with things that should be done, such as that upper ball joint and that sway bar and link. But we'll go ahead and take this caliper off. Okay, because there's a bit of rust on there, I tapped that off with that 3-pound mallet. It worked rather nicely. He's missing his whole shield there on the back side. I don't remember exactly what that shield's called, but nothing we're going to do about that today, as the whole hub would need to be removed in order to replace that shield, and I didn't know about it. But another thing to bring up, just a bit of rust here, probably came from out of state. Here in Utah, we usually don't see this much rust on a vehicle, but I think he may have had the bigger calipers and rotors already. Regardless, we will go ahead and get the new rotors on. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put some lug nuts on to keep this rotor down, since we're gonna be messing with this caliper for a minute. And we'll go ahead and address this caliper issue. Okay, so I'm about to get this brake line loose on the back here. As soon as I do that, I'm going to plug it with my finger so not a lot of fluid comes out, and then we'll get that new caliper over here and set up. But this was quite a bit more delicate than pretty much everything else I work on, just because of the amount of rust here. So okay. All right, so you can see there I've got my finger over the end of this line, just making sure that that is held closed, we don't lose all our fluid, and we'll go ahead and get that new caliper over here. Okay, there's that line in there, nice and tight. And we'll go ahead and bolt up this caliper tight as well. I've just got those bolts started in the back. Okay, so I was wrong about the pin. This little clip on the other side, on the old ones, It definitely just had one. This is the new hardware kit. So we'll make sure that there's no brake fluid on any of this, and then we'll put them back together. And then we've got to make sure this gets bled too. Actually, so the only other trick is you definitely always want to grease the side pins on a traditional caliper and contact points, but on these I don't grease them if they don't get grease from the factory. In this case, these don't get grease from the factory, so I'm not going to grease these, but I do put the wear indicator in the back, since that's the one that either wears out first or it's harder to see and look at and judge the thickness of the pad. So I put it in the back, that way if you can't see it, you can hear it. Okay, before we bleed this, we're going to make sure that reservoir is topped off so we don't start pulling air and then have a bigger issue to deal with. So we'll pop the hood and just fill up the reservoir. I'm not going to show you that, but just imagine pouring brake fluid into the reservoir till it's all the way full. All right, so I just like to gravity bleed calipers. So we'll just crack this line and wait for it to start dripping, and then we can put the bottle on it and pump it, but it just depends on what's coming out of here. If it looks like it's no air, then we'll just leave it at gravity bleed, which is what I typically do. And this isn't like an instructional video to like tell you this is the end-all be-all procedure to doing it. This is just a way of saying here's how I do it. You know, you're welcome to take tips, but don't, you know, if you don't like the way I do something, don't do it. So once this starts dripping, it's going to drip fluid down onto this caliper. We'll just spray it off with brake cleaner, and then we'll pump the brakes. There it goes, starting to drip, and that looks like no air. That's pretty good. So I'm gonna let that run for a minute, and then we'll close it up, and then we'll pump the brakes just to get these pads to touch. That way it's ready for the brakes to go whenever the customer drives off. All right, there you have it. Brand new brake set on this side. We've got a new caliper, new brake pads, and a brand new rotor. Upsized them because this was initially the 16-inch wheel rotor and caliper, but we've upgraded them to the 17 since we were replacing both, and it looks awesome. So we'll get this tire back on, which I also stick under the car for safety. I don't always point this stuff out, but I'm usually super safe about how I work on cars. So we'll get everything put back together. It's about 100 degrees, so I wasn't rushing. It probably took me about half an hour, and on the other side I'll probably go a bit quicker since I'm going to be in the sun, and hopefully be done about 15 minutes, maybe 20. But that's how you do it. We'll do a time lapse of the other side, and we'll get this all put back together. All right, so there you have it. I'm almost done cleaning now. That's all that's left. And as of right now, it's been 23 minutes since I started that other side. So went nice and smooth, which was fortunate. Brake fluid reservoirs topped off. We got to pump the brakes still, but other than that, everything's good to go. Finished packing up. And this is the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest. This is how you change some brakes. This is how I do it. I set everything up. If you like the video, consider subscribing. Check out our channel for more extra awesome videos. We'll see you on the next episode. This is a job well done. All right, just for extra measure here, we're bleeding them again. They were a little soft, so there was a bit of air left in them. I'm gonna go ahead and finish taking that out. I think it's because I had this side jacked up so high that a lot of air stayed up on that other side instead of it being flat. So it's coming out now, and we'll just double check that other side as well because we want this to be safe.